Hi there. So this is Vladimir. I'm the person that usually hides behind PowerPoint presentations when I record my videos. However, this time, because I want to record a video about control, I thought it would only be fair if I do so in a setting that is not very controlled. If I'm going to talk about the downsides of trying to control everything, I might kind of, I don't know, get out of my own comfort zone. So this morning when I was, this morning, half an hour ago, when I was leaving the place where I'm currently staying to take my dog for a walk, I thought to myself, well, I should just record the video in the park. It's a very pretty park. Um, and also it's a setting that I absolutely cannot control. I only have my phone and I don't really like seeing my own reflection in the mirror. I have no desire to be seen publicly, so that's a situation where I'm completely outside of my comfort zone, so you're welcome. Um, anyway, I want to talk about control and how control helps you develop more self-compassion and how control kind of hinders developing self-compassion. This topic arose from my conversations with a wonderful client that I have. And control has been one of the things that we've been exploring since we began our work together, specifically where control works for my client and where it doesn't work. And we were kind of trying to find ways to make that control healthy. So to make it in service of her well-being instead of a hindrance to it. And we also talked about self-compassion quite a bit. And if you work with me, then or have ever worked with me, then you know that I talk about self-compassion quite a lot. And this is because I think that this desire to reduce our own suffering, which is what self-compassion is really fundamental to any successful change. If you don't want to suffer less, then think about it. Why would you actually ever change? Right? So developing self-compassion is frequently the first step that we have to take so that we can change successfully. I'm going to have to get up and start walking because my dog has decided that we are leaving and she's about, I don't know, 2 minutes ahead of me. So there you go. So much for, yeah, maybe too much out of my comfort zone. Anyway, so I told my client that I'm going to prepare a 7-day meditation challenge to talk about so that we can understand a little bit better how she sees connections between control and self-compassion, and then I'm going to create a lecture to accompany that challenge. And so the lecture was going to be the PowerPoint presentation. Let me turn around so that you can see my dog guiding me. I hope you can see her. So what was I talking about? Oh, yes. And the lecture was, of course, going to be a PowerPoint presentation, like I always do. And then, so here I am trying to substitute that for something that is outside of my comfort zone. So let's talk about control then. Why is it that people need to control things? And how we control things, and is this good or is this bad? Without going into too much technical psychological language, I would argue that control isn't a bad thing and that control is not something that we can escape. It's just a matter of how we conduct ourselves, or rather, what is it that we try to control? As I'm thinking right now here in this park, and I might change my mind later, we can think about control in maybe 2 or 3 different levels to make this conversation make sense. On a very banal, kind of everyday level, we can say that control is something we need so that we can achieve the goals that we have in life, right? So that control is something that you need to have so that you can go where you want to go. If you want to get your promotion at work, then it's kind of obvious that you're not going to need a degree of control. So you're going to need to take some steps, and you're going to need the ability to take those steps. And that's where control comes in very handy. If you want to pass an exam, if you're studying at the university, then having control is necessary because you have to sit down and study. Right, so in that very kind of everyday sense, control is really needed. Lunch is not going to make itself. Um, you know, now I can't even see myself. I hope you can see this lovely fall, because I'm not at home. And since I have been actively avoiding winters, I forgot how much I actually like autumn. It's rather beautiful. And I hope the sound of the leaves is not too much. Anyway, so on this kind of like everyday banal level, control is actually a very good thing because it helps us move along, it helps us achieve our goals, it helps us do what we want to do in life, right? Then we can say that on a slightly more psychological level, control is how we reduce anxiety and how we feel safer. Control is about knowing what will happen, how it will happen, when it will happen, and what is exactly is it that you will do to when that something happens, right? So it's about predicting events and controlling events. When you know that you have the tools to deal with whatever troubles you, then you feel like you're in control, and control allows you to feel calmer. So if you have a hard time dealing with anxiety, uh, being in control is going to help you reduce that anxiety. Um, if you don't feel safe around people, having control over what you share in conversations or controlling the conversations themselves could be a way for you to feel in control. So there's that. I think we can even go one step further. Just 1 second, trying to see where, there she is. So I think we can even go one step further and say that control can be seen as a mechanism of emotional regulation. Because if you can predict and control events, then you can make sure that you experience less and less of what you're afraid of or what you're having a hard time dealing with. So if you have a hard time controlling anger, leaving a situation that might make you angry is a good way to have control over yourself and over the situation so that you don't experience anger. So that's one thing. So as you can see, there are many good things about control. So what exactly is the problem? The problem is that we don't really have, or at least most of us, some of the time, don't really have a good grasp of what we can and cannot control. Let me give you an example. Today is a very lovely day. I'm turning around. Oh, there she is. Um, so today is a very lovely sunny day. But the weather forecast this morning said occasional showers. So I brought an umbrella with me that I'm holding in the other hand, in which I'm not holding my phone. So all this is a very stable setup, as you can see. So that's the only control that I can exert over the situation. If I know that it's going to rain, I can bring an umbrella. But I can't really control whether it will rain or not. That's something that's beyond me, right? It will either happen or it won't happen. It's not something that a human can influence, at least not at this point of our technological development. And that's exactly, I think, the whole point of control and about control, psychologically speaking. It's not whether it's good or bad, it's how we try to establish control. We can never secure outcomes, unfortunately. But what we can do is create good strategies and learn from experience. So that's one way that we can always have a healthy sense of control. I'm going to try and generalize here since I'm walking around and free associating. And I'll go ahead and say, where is she? Oh, there she is. Um, so I'm going to go ahead and say that there are basically only two things that we can control most of the time, and that's what we say and what we do. Everything else is difficult, almost impossible to control. If you think about, for example, your thoughts, some of them we can control. Like more or less, I can control what I say now and also how I think about things as I'm saying them. But in general, if you've ever sat down and meditated for longer than 5 minutes, I'm sure that you have the experience of thoughts just popping up spontaneously, and sometimes even very intense feeling popping up spontaneously. So that means that we don't really have control over what we feel either, or what we think. So our internal world, while not random and irrational, isn't necessarily under our conscious control. So one way that we can gain a sense of control is to learn to trust our unconscious processes, which takes a lot of time and isn't easy. But we can't, but technically, if you're trying to find, this is one of those big misconceptions about meditation, is that somehow you're going to have an empty mind or no thoughts or things like that. That just doesn't happen. Sometimes it might happen, but you will have no control over it when it happens or how long it lasts while it's happening. So you have no choice but to kind of let go. So in that sense, we don't really control our internal experiences completely. At the same time, so I'm recording this in October of 2023, after the long and arduous pandemic, which has affected all of us, and a year and a half or even 2 years after the war in Ukraine started, and now the wars in the Middle East are starting again. So as you can see, on the large scale of things, there are many things out there in the world that we can't control either. And that's not, I don't mean this in some abstract sense, like there are wars and bad things happening. All these things will affect you as well as me very personally. People will lose their jobs, economies will tank, prices will go up. Some of this we've all been experiencing in the past few years, and this all affects our lives, and there's absolutely nothing that we can do about that. So we can control very little about what happens outside. Some we can, most unfortunately we can't. And we can control some of what happens inside, but not all of it. Or at least not all of it at any given moment. So what gives then? What can we control? Like I said, we can control what we say and we can control what we do. Psychologically speaking, that means that we can control the thoughts that we take seriously and thoughts that we let go. This is something that we usually learn through extensive and quite frequently extremely difficult meditation practice. Oh, I have to show you my dog. Look at her. She's so, well, you can't see her. Oh, she's adorable. Let me see if I can switch over the camera so that you can see her. Oh, no, I can't switch over the camera. Oh, no, I can't. I'm just pressing the wrong button. Yep, this is video. There you go. I'm learning. Next time, I'll do better. So, there's very little that we can control. When we mistaken what we can control and cannot control, I think that is where a lot of suffering happens. So, think about perfectionism, for example. That is a great enemy of. I'm just gonna sit here for a while because it's hard to walk and hold this at the same time. So, think about compassion, for example. No, what did I say? I said perfectionism. So, what exactly is, so in my vision of the world, my dog would just come now and we would cuddle and talk, and that would be just unbearably cute, but it's not happening because she has something very important to smell. So, perfectionism is a very good example of how trying to have control excessively in a way that doesn't work actually leads to more suffering. So, it's the opposite of self compassion. The far enemy of compassion, as they say in Buddhism, is cruelty. So if you're not compassionate to yourself, you're being cruel to yourself. It's really that simple. Perfectionism sets very high goals for a person, goals that are frankly almost always unattainable, goals that don't allow you for a lot of space to change, adapt. There's no variation. There's just this one goal which you either achieve or you don't achieve. Most of the time you don't. So you end up suffering. As a result, what you do is you usually try to be more rigorous. You become harder on yourself also. Let's say you want to have straight A's, but then you get a B. So next time, instead of saying, oh, well, maybe I can just prepare so much and then my professors can always ask questions that I just can't remember the answers to or couldn't find a place to read about, to learn about. No, a perfectionist is going to say, well, next time, instead of studying 10 hours a day, you'll be studying 12 hours a day. Instead of studying 5 days a week, you'll be studying 7 days a week. And then you'll ace everything. And then you don't. Because the closer you get to your exam, you start feeling more anxious. And then, even if you did learn everything, it's highly likely that you will not remember everything because you are in a state of panic most of the time. So, that way, by trying to control more, you're causing more suffering for yourself, or you're treating yourself with more cruelty. This is, I think, a very common example of how trying to have control, when you're trying to control the wrong things, um, you end up being more cruel to yourself. And in that sense, control is an enemy of compassion, or self compassion at the very least. However, this doesn't really have to be the case. If you focus on saying that you can control what you say and control what you do, uh, and if you measure how well you did based on what you can do right now, what you let go of, what you decide to cling to, what thoughts you take seriously, what thoughts you let go. Uh, if you are able to think about the context that you're in right now, instead of projecting some ideal scenario onto them, then you might come to this place where control actually helps you be more compassionate to yourself. Take a look at this video. This is one big mess. I'm improvising, I'm walking. I've never recorded a video walking before, so I actually am blinded most of the time because the sun is in my face. I have to keep track of my dog, which I'm terrified of losing. So this is really far from being an ideal video. But I realize that I want to get my point across, and hopefully I will do that. And if I do that, then I've been successful. And even though my camera is shaking, there are ants walking all over me. Um, the video is not a complete failure. So here's my point in a nutshell. When you focus your control on how you act, or rather what you say and what you do, instead of on outcomes or what you're supposed to be in your mind, control is your friend. And it works to enhance self compassion. Now, why is that? When you choose how to, when you kind of, how do you evaluate, uh, how do you evaluate whether you acted well or said something good? What people who don't know how to assess what they can control and what they can't control, when they try to assess this, they focus on other people. They focus on all the theories that other people could possibly have about them now because of what they said. And this is not something that we can ever control. People will think what people will think. What you can do is choose your words carefully. Something I have granted been failing for the past 18 minutes to do because I'm rambling on, but I didn't say anything bad about anyone's um, anything, so I guess success in that regard. But my point here is that you can say, I want to come across as a compassionate person, or I want to be a kind person, or I want to, I don't know, appear professional. I want to be the whatever, strong, silent type. I don't know. You have this idea of how you want to act. In the moment when you're supposed to say something or react or make a choice, the only control that you have is to come back to who you want to be in that specific situation and then see what's the best that you can do. You will never achieve whatever you feel is perfect because perfection does not exist in the world. It's just not a thing. Perfection is an image, and the world is the world. It's kind of like a difference between the territory and the map. The map is always a slightly idealized, impossible version of the territory that is always being reshaped by natural forces. So, if you want to be a compassionate person and you manage to act compassionately most of the time, I think you've done a good enough job. In the context of the situation in which you are, you can only do the best that you can do in that particular moment. And that's the whole key, really. I've been talking for 20 minutes to get to this point. Um, let's say that I want to come across as um, hmm, I'm going to have to find a way to accelerate this video because these silences are kind of boring. But so let's say I want to come across as, because this feels very true to how I want to be seen as a therapist or a coach. Let's say I want to come across as someone who's patient. And sometimes you have clients who are not very patient, who demand results immediately, or people who will react intensely when they hear things that they don't necessarily want to hear, or even if your question in their minds suggests something that they don't want to hear. This is perfectly normal, and I've been to my own therapy and still am in my own therapy. Um, so I know what that feels like. Like no one wants. Sorry, I'm running away from a bug. So no one wants to hear bad things about themselves. No one wants to face their kind of darker sides. But and so people can sometimes react very intensely. They can get angry at me. They can object to what I'm saying. They can argue with me, and sometimes it's also very tempting to say, "Hey, here's why I said what I said. These are my arguments. Boom, 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 boom. This, and this. So deal with it now." But that's obviously not a very good way to go about being a therapist or anything for that matter. If I want to come across as patient, then what I'm going to do is listen. I'm going to see and try to locate where this person's objection is. And then I'm going to ask questions. And then I'm going to explain everything I said very carefully in a way that is not confrontational. Sometimes, although rarely, over the years, I guess we do change in that sense. But when I was a younger therapist, I would get really impatient or sometimes upset because I would have this idea about what's happening with my client, and I would think the idea is perfectly fine. And many times it was. It was very accurate. But my clients simply weren't in the place where they could hear that, at least not said in the way in which I had said it. So over the years, I learned to say, okay, tell me what you object to. I want to hear you out. And then to just genuinely hear people out. And then to take my theories, accurate as they may be, and throw them in the trash until such time comes that my clients will produce their own version of that theory. So for me, whenever I feel, let's say, frustration or anxiety or anger, um, control comes in because I know what I am as a therapist, which is a patient therapist. And so I will respond with, tell me what you don't like about this. How does this make you feel? Or I will say, here's why I said what I said. And then I would explain it very carefully and say, tell me where I'm wrong. Because ultimately, if you want to be a patient therapist or a patient coach or a good therapist or a good coach, you are going to have to listen to how people think about themselves. I, as a therapist, my clients' theories about themselves always supersede anything I read in a book. And even though my bookish knowledge may seem logical and cool to me, ultimately, people I work with get to say what's true for them. So a patient therapist is going to be able to put aside their theories, and we can get really enthusiastic about our theories, um, and then listen. So that's the control that I can have. I have no control over what my clients bring to therapy. Sometimes, frankly, I can't even guess what will happen to them during the week, what experiments they will undertake, what they will try to do. But if I want to be the kind of therapist that I want to be, I will sit, listen, and ask questions. Ultimately, that is the only thing that I can do and control. Sometimes that means that my clients will be happy with me. Sometimes that means that they will leave therapy feeling like I'm the bad guy and maybe spend some time disliking me. Sometimes because I mess up and because I'm not perfect. I'm kind of like this video all over the place. And at other times, it's because because of what we call transference, because they have to see me as the bad guy in that moment. It's what they need psychologically. So being a patient therapist means enduring that, means sitting with their anger, sitting with their hopelessness, sitting with their frustrations. Right? So that's what I can control. I can't control what they say or what they do or how they see me in the end. Uh, so where does self-compassion comes into play here? Um, I think the only way that self-compassion and control can feed into each other is if you actually make it a concentrated effort to be a self-compassionate person. This can be quite a journey because it means that you have to adopt being compassionate as a value to yourself, but also to others, because these things are kind of hard to exclude. You can't say, I'll just be compassionate to myself and screw the rest of the world. You have to be either compassionate to everyone, or there's a lot to improve, when it comes to your compassion. So the first step is to say, yes, I actually want to become a person that is compassionate. And then intentionally start making decisions based on that. In this moment, if I'm suffering, how can I help myself? Actually, let me do this as an exercise, because I'm sitting on the floor, but I'm leaning on my right hip, and it's starting to hurt because the ground is not a soft pillow. So what I can do for myself is move like this, the other side, right? So now I'm suffering a little less. That's a compassionate thing to do. And that was in my control. If it starts raining now, which let's hope it doesn't, the only thing that I can do is use the umbrella that I brought with me. But that's all the control that I have. So for control and compassion to feed into each other, you actually have to adopt sincerely compassion as your value. That means perhaps that some other values have to be disrupted or changed or reframed. That means that maybe you can have productivity as your value if you have compassion as your value, because at some point, to be productive enough, you will have to suffer. And if you want to suffer less, then you will probably have to be a little less productive. I mean, the good news is that if you're 10% less productive, chances are no one will notice but yourself. So you don't actually lose much. But this is a difficult leap to make. So through this 7-day challenge, and you can download the PDF below somewhere in the description. When YouTubers do that, it always looks cooler than when I do that here. You can download the challenge. You also have a guided meditation that you can download and use as a template. And every day you have self-compassion phrases that are related to control, and you have an informal assignment to do. I advise you to do as much journaling as you possibly can with this challenge. And if you really want to challenge yourself, you can extend the 7-day challenge into a 7-week challenge. And then observe how you react to the phrases, what obstacles you can identify, observe your resistance, observe what makes you feel good, what feels right. In everyday assignments, observe where you hesitate, where you see obstacles, what you're willing to do, what makes you happy, and journal about that. And then if you're in therapy or coaching or whatever kind of mental health, or if you're just doing it on your own, do a review after you finish the challenge, and then identify goals so that you can proceed further to incorporate this. So let me summarize, because I've been talking for almost half an hour. The key to making control an ally in developing self-compassion, and the key to making control compassionate rather than cruel, is focusing your control on the only two things that you actually can control, which is what you say and what you do. Try to let go of everything else. Nothing else is worth judging yourself over. You can have bad thoughts. We all have bad thoughts. I don't know anyone who doesn't have bad thoughts. The more I meditate, the more I'm appalled at my brain and what it's able to produce. So yeah, and I've been meditating for over 20 years. So everyone's brain's a mess. You can't really judge yourself based on something that is not in your control. What you can do is resist thoughts to hurt other people or to say mean things. What you can do is say no to actually doing mean things or participating in things that cause harm to others. That's in your control. You can do your best at work. Your best won't be perfect. You can do your best in whatever your current situation is. But whether you will get that promotion is kind of not up to you. It's up to your boss, and your boss can um, kind of promote someone else because they like someone else better, because they have connections, because they stand to benefit something, from that promotion. That's not something that you can control. I don't agree with the Stoics on everything, or on their notion of control for that matter, but roughly they do have a good point, which is that things that are not in our immediate control, those things are neither good nor bad. Some things we might prefer, some things we might not prefer, or as they would call them, preferred or dispreferred indifference. So it's really good to be healthy. It's much better to be healthy than to be sick. But because this is not in our control, it's not really worth your time judging this as this or that. It's something that you just must accept, and then see a doctor, or, take your therapy regularly. Getting that promotion is better than not getting that promotion, but ultimately that's not in your hands. You've done the best you could, and that's it. You have to accept and move on. So the Stoics had this idea that I disagree with, that you can control your thoughts and your feelings. It's my experience that you cannot, and also a lot of psychological theory and research point to the fact that you can. So I truly don't think they're right. But what you can do is choose what thoughts to believe and what thoughts not to believe. What you take as fact and what you take as an assumption. And according to the kind of psychology that I practice and live by, all our thoughts are hypothetical, and some hypotheses are simply more likely than others. And you can pause and make that assessment and decide what's likely, what isn't likely. That's something that's always in your control, and that's a compassionate thing to do. What is not a compassionate thing to do is when you try to cling to your thoughts that feed into your fears, because what we're afraid of somehow seems more real. And that's not a compassionate thing to do, and it's also not a very good way to establish control. So if there are two things that you need to take away from this. It's that control is not bad. It's actually not even avoidable. As George Kelly, my favorite psychologist, said, um, every person is like a scientist, meaning that we try to make sense of the world. So we create these assumptions, then we check them and see if they work. Why do scientists do this? So that they can predict and control events. Why do humans do this? So that we can predict and control events. So number one, control is not bad. What's bad is how you try to establish control, where point number two comes. Second point is the only thing that you can ever control is what you say and what you do. That's it. So thank you, my dog Sarah and I, sir. So this is my dog, and she's not in the mood to say hello, but we both say goodbye.